Welcome to another episode of 10-Minute Topic. I'd like to apologize for having to cancel last week, but to make up for that, this week we'll be doing a double session. So this week will be a little different. We'll be looking directly at the past paper while we're talking about the material related to answering the questions, instead of doing it first and then coming to the question after. So we'll be doing HSB past paper today, 2012 January, and we'll be looking at question 2 and question 3. So question 2 deals with the heart. And this is what we have here laid out for us to do. So figure 3 is a schematic diagram showing the human heart and the related blood vessels. They give us a major hint by showing us that this is the right side and this is the left side. But we could also tell by looking at the direction of the arrows and the fact that this is coming from the body, and you know where the lungs is situated and everything. So part A asks us to identify the parts labeled A, B, and C. If we had to label what is A, the major hint would be that we would look at this here, which is the lungs. So what brings the oxygenated blood from the lungs into the left side of the heart? A would be our pulmonary vein. B is where the oxygenated blood is first entering into. And this is at the top. So this is the top chambers. And this would be our left atrium. And below we know this is our ventricles. And this side, which is C, this is referring to the right side. So C would be our right ventricle. That would be our 3 marks there. Then part B, using the words provided in brackets, use the words provided in brackets and complete table 2 to show 3 differences in structure between arteries and veins. So the words that we have in the brackets, we have thin, thick, elastic, inelastic, absent, and present. So this table here, we have to plug in this information to describe the differences between arteries and veins. So it's the difference between the walls and whether they have valves or not in the arteries and the veins. So what will we put under arteries for the walls? We know that in the artery, or the artery itself is responsible for carrying blood, oxygenated blood that is, under high pressure. For this to happen, we know that the walls or the vessel must be elastic. And if this is being carried under high pressure, then we wouldn't want anything to burst the vessels easily. So therefore it would need to be thick. Veins carry blood under low pressure. So for this, what would fit here is inelastic and thin, because it doesn't carry the blood under high pressure. Therefore, there's no need for it to be very elastic or for it to be thick. And with the presence or the absence of valves, we know that in the arteries, again, blood is carried under high pressure. Therefore, there's no need for valves because there isn't going to be any backflow there. But in the veins, once they're because blood is being carried under low pressure, with the beating of the heart, this could cause some fallback. We don't want that to happen, so therefore the veins is set up with valves. So there's the presence of valves there. So it will be absent in arteries and present in the veins. So part C, they're explaining to us how a pump works, and we have to relate that to the heart. So a pump is a machine that takes in liquid or gas. In this case, the pump is going to be the heart. The liquid is the blood. it takes in this liquid or gas at low pressure and pushes it at high pressure to another location without any backflow. So using the right side of the heart from the diagram above, relate the heart to the functioning of a pump by discussing the entrance and exit of blood. So we just have to talk about the right side. We're talking about the entrance, so how the blood gets into the right side of the heart, and the exit, how it leaves the right side of the heart. So we have here, or we know, that the deoxygenated blood is coming into the right side of the heart from the rest of the body via the main vein, which is the vena cava. So under low pressure, this blood is, this blood enters into the right atrium. And once we have that contracting of the muscle of the heart, that blood is squeezed through, remember these valves here, which would be your tricuspid valves. So it is squeezed through the tricuspid valves and it enters into the lower region, which is the right ventricle. Once we have the contracting of the heart again, or another cycle with the heartbeat, more deoxygenated blood is going to enter into the atrium. And what happens to the blood in the ventricle here? This is with the exit. So this blood is now going to be squeezed from the ventricle into your pulmonary artery. And then it's going to make its way to the lungs to become oxygenated. So this is the exit there. And how do we prevent the backflow, or what is stopping any backflow there? Well, the tricuspid valves prevent any backflow of blood from the ventricle into the atrium. So once the heart contracts again, this goes up, preventing the blood from going back into the atrium, and therefore the only way it can go is to the pulmonary artery. Then we have part 2 of that question there. To name the structure that prevents the backflow of blood between the chambers on the left side of the heart. So on the right side, we have the tricuspid valve, but on the left side, we have the bicuspid valve, or it is also called the mitral valve. Part 3, what action of the heart causes the blood to be pushed under high pressure? So we have the contracting of the heart during that heartbeat cycle. So with a heartbeat, we have a contract and a relax. It is the contracting reaction that pushes the blood under high pressure. Now part D, 1. The doctor told Uncle Ali that the muscles on the left side of his heart are weak. So explain why his heart, or why this heart problem causes Uncle Ali to have a lack in energy. Remember, energy is brought about by the process of respiration. So through respiration, the cells are able to convert glucose into ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate, what the body needs to do anything that requires energy. This has to be brought, or this for this respiration to take place in the mitochondria, where we get most of the ATP being made. We need this to happen aerobically, meaning that we need oxygen. Oxygen is brought by the blood. So if there's a problem with the left side of his heart, if that is weak, then remember it is from the left side of the heart where the oxygenated blood is leaving to go to the rest of the body. And this has to happen under high pressure. But if the muscles are weak there, then that means it's going to most likely be pushed out of the heart at somewhat of a low pressure. So how would we explain why this problem is causing him to have a lack of energy? Well, it is related to the fact that the respiring cells are not getting oxygen at a rapid pace. So therefore, there isn't much ATP or as much ATP being made as there should be. And part 2, explain how uncontrolled high blood pressure could affect the left side of the heart. Remember, if someone has high blood pressure, then that means that it's going to be forcing their heart to work even harder than it should be working. So with this now, what could happen to the left side of the heart is that the lower left heart chamber, which is your ventricle there, could become very thick. Therefore, this is going to increase the risk of having any sort of heart problems like heart failure, cardiac arrest, etc. Now to our second question. Question 3, part A. This is the same past paper, by the way. So part 1, state one advantage and one disadvantage of each of the following. So we have to state an advantage and disadvantage of both sexual and asexual reproduction. So I'll state 2 for each. So for sexual reproduction, remember with this, we need 2 partners. We need a male and a female within the same species. If it is out of the species or from different species, then it would not be able to successfully reproduce. So we need a male and a female to get the male gamete and the female gamete to fuse during that process of fertilization. So what's an advantage of sexual reproduction? The main one is variation, because the new individual that is going to be created has some material from the mother and some material from the father that is randomly distributed. So you're not sure, it's basically like a surprise bag. You're not sure what the individual is going to come out with, what characteristic traits. So we have variation. And with that, the second point I could make is that the offspring may be better suited for the environment. So if we're talking about plants, the offsprings may be more suited for the environment, whether it is that it could withstand drought or particular diseases that may be very prominent in that specific environment. And what's a disadvantage? Well, the fact that we need 2 parents. So if we're in a place where only a female or just one is there, then if something happens to that one individual, then that's the end. There's nothing, or there's no way that it can reproduce by itself if it utilizes that process of sexual reproduction. And the next thing that we can state is that it may result in unfavorable traits. As mentioned before, we don't know what traits the individual is coming out with. So both parents could have very, very favorable characteristics. So 2 things, or the parents may have a few traits that we want, and we expect all of these good traits to come together in the individual offspring. But this may not happen. The offspring may get all of the recessive traits. Then part B, with asexual reproduction, what is an advantage? The fact that we only need 1 parent. So we don't need to waste energy, or the organism doesn't need to waste energy to try and find a mate. And the next one is that we can have the preservation of favorable traits. So if we have a plant that has all of the favorable traits that we want, then with the offsprings, we know for sure through asexual reproduction that it's going to be a clone or exactly the same as the parent. So we're just getting more of the specific plant that has all of these favorable traits that we want. And the disadvantage, we have no variation because there's no male and female, it's just one individual. And this individual is simply creating clones of itself. Now with that, then with plants or even with animals that utilize asexual reproduction, if there's a particular disease that the parents were susceptible to, then the entire population, all of the offsprings would succumb to that particular disease as well, because there's no variation. All of them are identical to the parents. Then part 2, give 2 examples of asexual reproduction. So we have budding, we have grafting, and I can also say one more, we have binary fission. Then part B here goes on to sort of intervene into the whole menstrual cycle here, or parts of it. So researchers have developed a new contraceptive that targets the lining of the uterus. The old contraceptive functions by preventing ovulation, thus tricking the body into believing that it is pregnant. So 1, what is the relationship between estrogen and ovulation? So if you can remember the different hormones that are associated with the menstrual cycle, we have FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone. We have LH, which is luteinizing hormone. We have estrogen, and we have progesterone. We know that for the egg to become mature, FSH has to be released. When FSH is released and the egg is maturing, estrogen will start being produced to start thickening the lining of the uterus. After we have a thickening of the uterus lining, ovulation can occur, which is LH is going to be released to tell that follicle to release the mature egg. And the release of the egg is ovulation. So what's the relationship between estrogen and ovulation? Well, the estrogen initiates the thickening of the uterus lining. Thus, once it reaches a particular point, then this is, remember, a feedback mechanism. So once it reaches a particular point, then it's going to trigger the hormone that causes the ovulation or causes ovulation to be released, which is that LH. So that's a relationship between estrogen and ovulation. And part 2, what is the role of the lining of the uterus in pregnancy? We know the lining of the uterus for sure is where implantation takes place. And this is also where, remember, once it is fully developed, we have it being very rich in the blood supply. So this is where the fetus or the developing fetus is going to get that exchange occurring between itself and the mother. Remember, the blood never touches or comes into direct contact, but the materials are going to diffuse from the mother's blood into the fetus through the umbilical cord. And we have the structure there, the placenta. And on to the last 2, part 3, which hormone causes the lining of the uterus to thicken? That would be the estrogen. And 4, suggest 2 ways that the new contraceptive, which targets the lining of the uterus, may prevent pregnancy. So if the old the old contraceptive targeted the ovulation, right? It prevented ovulation from happening, therefore tricking the body into believing that it was pregnant. Then what is a new contraceptive doing that targets the lining of the uterus? How does this work? Well, I'll give 2 ways that I think this happens. So I think that A, it may prevent the estrogen production. So if it prevents estrogen production, then there's no thickening of the uterus lining. If there's no thickening of the uterus lining, then there's going to be no release of the mature egg. Therefore, no pregnancy can occur. And B, it may also prevent the lining from becoming fully developed. Because remember, I said this is a whole feedback mechanism taking place here. So if it doesn't get to that point that is going to trigger the body to release that hormone that is going to cause ovulation to occur, then no ovulation can occur, therefore no pregnancy can occur. So that brings us to the end of today's session, the double take, making up for last week's session and this week's session. I do hope that you remain till the end. If you did, thank you. Remember to share, like, subscribe, so you'll never miss an episode, and also get the word out there. Also, feel free to leave any comments letting us know which questions from which past papers you'd like for us to try next. Bye.